This is an Irreverent podcast. Check out irreverent.fm for shows from all our friends. Hello and welcome to Evangelical. I'm your host, Blake Chastain. This week I have the pleasure of sharing my conversation with Nicola Stevens. Nicola and I, through the mundane miracle of Skype, spoke across the international date line. Nicola lives in Brisbane, Australia, and is my first guest living internationally. Nicola and I talk about her experience in the evangelical culture of Australia, her experience with OCD and anxiety, raising 2 children, and becoming an immigration activist. Oh, and she also went to church with Ken Ham's family, so creationism factors into this conversation as well. There's a lot of similarities between Aussie and American evangelicalism, and I'm sure that you'll identify them. One thing to note, I spoke to Nicola in the middle of the day her time. It was 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening here in Chicago, and 11 a.m. Wednesday morning where she was making the call. Nicola is very gracious to accommodate me, and throughout the recording you may hear things like birds chirping in the occasional car, as well as the sound of some kids at the end, because that's literally just life. It was really lovely to have a video window into someone's life on the other side of the world, and I'm really happy I can share that with you. As always, you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/exvangelicalpod, or by leaving a review on iTunes. I didn't receive any iTunes reviews this week, at least here in the US that I can see, so I don't get to share any with you. Please leave a review, which will help people find the show, and I'll read it on the air. You can also follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Anchor at exvangelicalpod, and I'm on Twitter at brchastain. You can also find my guest, Nicola Stevens, on Anchor as well. Search for her name, Nicola Stevens, Nicola Stevens with a V, on Anchor, and you'll find her station as well. You can also email the show at contact@exvangelicalpodcast.com. All right, let's get into it. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Evangelical. I have with me Nicola Stevens. She is from Brisbane, Australia, and a writer over at my2companions.wordpress.com. Welcome to the show, Nicola.
Thank you, Blake. It's really exciting to be here. The one and only Blake Chastain.
Oh, my goodness. I've never heard myself. you totally caught me off guard with that.
This is my podcast.
Yeah, and I'm really happy that we made this happen. This is my first call to the future. You're in Wednesday already. Where it's Tuesday where I am. So very excited about that, and I'm happy that we're able to do this. So let's just start with your background. Where did you grow up in Australia? And let's just start right there from the very beginning.
Okay. Sure. Very beginning. So I have always lived kind of around Brisbane. I actually live in like it's not a little city, but it's a city next to Brisbane called Logan, and I live right on the border of Brisbane and Logan now, and I grew up in Logan, but going to church from a really young age. Like I think my mum said I was there the week after I was born or something. The Sunday after I was born, I was in church, and I've kind of been in church ever since then. So I'm 31 now, so that's a few church services under my belt. Yeah.
That's a lot of church years. So what did the church your family attended? Did it have an affiliation, like a denomination, or? Yeah.
So it's a Baptist church, and it is in Australia. I think we have Baptist churches that are associated with like a governing type body called the Baptist Union, or maybe that's just in Queensland in my state. That might just be in my state. And then there's also independent Baptists who are just their own individual local church, but ours was affiliated with the Baptist Union.
Okay.
And so they I think the Baptist Union helps oversee like the churches under their umbrella and with employment of pastors and other things too, like other resources. I think they run other programs and even like when churches want to do building, I think they can, rather than borrow from a bank, if they want to borrow from the Baptist Union, I think that can happen, and then repay the loan to the union rather than to a bank. I think, I could be wrong. I'm open to being corrected on that, but I think that's, and also just accountability, like sort of overseeing what other training. So all the pastors are getting like, a certain level of training and just overseeing how the churches are going. And if there's a problem, then I guess there is someone else that you can go to, or I don't know if church members go to anyone. They might be able to, but just having that extra, I guess, layer. So we weren't independent Baptist. There is an independent Baptist church not far from where I live, and the sign is kind of scary. It's like independent fundamentalist. Like this is on there, like sign out the front of the church. And I remember like driving past it a few years ago, and I hadn't really started my deconstruction yet. But I remember thinking even before I'm like, oh gee, that looks so intimidating. Like I have been to church all my life, and I don't think they would be like looking very kindly on me.
Wow.
And then I thought, well, how would they be like looking on everybody else? I'm like, what about a welcome sign? Welcome, please join us.
Yeah.
That could be an idea.
Yeah, looks like a barracks instead of a church.
I don't know. It's a bit scary. So my church is not like that. They weren't like independent fundamentalists. Like mine. Thankfully, they had like a nicer sign than that. But Baptist. So I'm not sure if that, and I'm not really sure of the difference in denominations between Australia and the US. I'm kind of curious about that actually because I don't really know.
We could probably just have a little Q&A about that actually. I mean, within the United States, there are also a lot of different types of Baptist denominations. The largest one, and one of the largest denominations in the United States overall, is the Southern Baptist Convention.
Okay, convention,
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they're the largest, and they're known for being theologically and socially, politically conservative. Believe in things like inerrancy of the biblical text. What else? Generally, traditional gender roles, whether they believe in egalitarianism or complementarianism, is probably more congregational, but because the way it's set up is that Baptists are supposed to be what is called creedal, so that just means that the like local congregation makes the final say, but the convention kind of binds them together, binds all these Southern Baptist churches together. I think I have that right. I have one of my very good friends is a religious historian, so if I have that wrong, he'll probably tell me. But
just ask corrections in comments.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, somebody correct me on Twitter whether they're creedal or non-creedal. I don't remember. I'm sorry.
It's hard to have the facts when you're having a conversation. Like just off the top of your head.
Yeah. So that's sort of the hallmarks. There is a denomination called Independent Baptist. There's things like Free Will Baptists, where it's clear that they're not Calvinist or believe in predestination, that sort of thing. Probably pretty similar. Does that sound similar to the denominations in Australia?
Yeah, that sounds pretty familiar. Like in terms of, we have different denominations, but in terms of Baptist, now I'm going to need someone to correct me because I don't really know. Like I don't even know. You're talking about creedal, non-creedal. I don't really know if that's what we do, but I think there were definitely, similarities with. I think different people could hold different theological positions, but I think usually the pastors are the ones kind of driving the agenda or the overall mood or the culture. Yeah, they're driving the culture. So if they think, if they're complementarian, then that's probably the way the church is, you know, going to see it. But then again, you know, and it's also the elders, I think. So, and the pastors, like when they collaborate, what they sort of come up with. We actually have a church constitution. That's right. We had a church constitution in my childhood church. I don't go to that church.
Yeah.
We had a church constitution, and the church could actually it went to the members' meetings. So yeah, this is all coming back now. Yeah, so we went to all the members' meetings, and we would go to the members' meetings and we'd vote on stuff. And when we wanted to change the constitution, it was like a huge rigmarole because you're changing the rules basically, like the governance of the church. So that was it was quite actually, I guess, democratic in that way, or I think it was supposed to be democratic anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always the loudest people, you know, who went out in those kinds of situations, I think. So, I went to a million meetings even as a teenager because I was a member, but I didn't think I could vote until I was 18, so there was not really much point in going, which I didn't really realise. I should just sit at the back and just make snide comments or whatever. Or I would try and participate, but it was tricky to participate because, that you could say stuff, but you couldn't really, you know, make any change. So, they were more, now that we talk about it, I remember, more trying to be democratic and,
So what was aside from the sort of like church administration and politics, what was the overall sort of culture like in your home church? Was it were all the leaders men? How did women participate? Did you have a youth group, like all those sorts of things?
Yes. Yeah. So in my childhood church, the pastors were always men. We did have a female, like women were allowed to preach, but I only remember maybe one woman actually preaching a sermon in that church. I think like women would get up and speak for other things like events, or if an organisation or missionaries or whatever came to speak at the church as like guests, then women, you know, would do that, and women would lead worship as well and so forth. So that, it was men who were the pastors, and then we didn't have elders when I was a kid, and then eventually we kind of reworked our church structure and decided they needed elders, and why didn't we have elders? So then we had this big discussion about like if we were going to have women as elders or not have women as elders, and I think the pastor was not really opposed to having women as elders, but in the end the church decided they only wanted men as elders, like the whole the members meeting or whatever. So it was men who were the elders. So it was all men there. And then with youth group, we did have a youth group, and we always love to talk about youth group. So my youth group was like probably similar to yours. Like I went to 2 youth groups when I was in high school. I went to a Pentecostal one because some of my friends went there, and that was quite contrasted to the Baptist one. Because the Baptists were, it was more like come and play some games and like kick a football around outside, and then we'll go in and have like a, maybe have like a video, or someone will talk, and then we'll split into groups and talk about what the topic was, and then all come back together and play more games and eat junk food and kick the footy around. So it's pretty like relaxed and casual, and sometimes we do like go and have like a sleepover night or something with another church, which was like obviously no sleep at all, and movies and, you know, just like fun stuff. And then the Pentecostal was like praise and worship night, you know. So I was like, and I played keyboard there for a little while, and that was good, but it was pretty full on. But I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the just, you know, having like feeling like there was like an intense focus on God and on that relationship with Him. I think I enjoyed that. Mm-hmm. And then the other youth group, I was maybe not like I went sometimes. I didn't go as much until I was a bit older in my Baptist one, my home church. So, and I think I had some more friends there by then, so it was a bit more fun. And then we started like another youth thing on a Saturday night. So the youth group was usually on Friday night. And then on Saturday nights we would have like I think once a month we'd have like, I think they called it a hub night or something. And it was just like a praise and worship night, and someone would speak, and just for young. I played in the band for that as well, and played for church as well, like keyboard and piano and stuff. So, I really enjoyed that aspect of it too. I haven't done that for a long time, but I really enjoyed it. Playing. So it was good. And I sort of wasn't in deconstruction mode at all then, and that has been a much more recent thing. So I had this like long time at church and just kind of accepted what I was told, and even like, and questioned it sometimes, but just kind of took it on as my own faith as I got older. And it was fine. It was fine. It was fine. But things change.
Yeah. So you, at the time, you felt comfortable with your church and with the sorts of youth group things. I'm not trying to be leading with the question. I'm just sort of reading your response and hearing your response. And the way you describe it, it sounded like an overall sort of positive thing at the time.
Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the other things that was positive was that, I know that often with youth group in the States, like you've mentioned, and it's a theme with some of your guests, is that purity culture is a big part of like youth group and a big part of that kind of like youth stuff in the States. It's not really in Australia. It's not really like a big thing. Like, it might be, oh, well, don't have sex before you're married. That's kind of the extent of it. Like there's none of this. You're not allowed to date. You're not allowed to do X, Y, and Z. Like maybe individual families have their own family rules about that kind of stuff. But there's nothing coming from the church leadership like you should do this, you should do that.
Right.
It's just, youth group leaders will talk about it, but they're not setting down rules like if you do this, this is terrible, or, it's much more relaxed. Like it's heaps more relaxed. And I think that
you guys dodged a bullet.
In youth group it is. But there's other places it can kind of crop up, and
so where would it crop up then?
Well, so in Australia, I know you guys have Campus Crusade in the US.
Yeah.
So we have a similar thing in Australia as well, like a university campus ministry run under the umbrella of Campus Crusade for Christ. And now they've called it, I don't know do they still call it that in the US?
I think so. Yeah, I can't keep track of all of them. I know there's Campus Crusade, there's InterVarsity.
Yes, there's InterVarsity.
Yeah, there's at least those two. There's a few others. I'm sure there's plenty, but those are a couple of the big ones.
Yeah, so I was involved in the Campus Crusade kind of branch as a university student, and it was called Student Life, and even though again from the leadership it wasn't really like enforced, I think we'd all kind of been involved in that like Christian pop culture. Not pop culture, but just like that Christian culture, and we'd all read it, So like Josh Harris was a massive like bestseller in Christian bookstores here in Australia.
Oh, he was. Okay.
Yeah. Even though my church was not like, oh, we're going to take this on as a thing, he was still like just everyone knew who he was. Everyone read his books. I think most people were like, I don't think they really like, but I was a very like, earnest young person and very, in some ways, very scrupulous as well. And I think that had to do with my own kind of issues around anxiety at that time, which I didn't realize I had. But I was like, oh, I've got to get everything right. I've got to make sure that I'm just doing the best that I can. got to follow God and honor him and all that stuff. So when I'm reading like Josh Harris at this time, I was about 15, and I'd just gone through this experience where suddenly I was on a Christian camp, and it had like this altar call, it all sounds really evangelical, and it was, but I did have this experience where I felt a real connection to Jesus, and I was like, oh, like it's like the light came on for me, and I went, oh, this is not just this person that I read about in a book and people are always telling me about. Like I did believe in him, and I had, prayed like a prayer inviting him into my life when I was quite young.
Mm-hmm.
But it was about 15. It was like I got it, and I was like, oh, this is real. Like, yeah, so that was really amazing. But then off the back of that, so I'm on this big high, like spiritual high, it's amazing, la, 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 reading my Bible, fantastic. And then off the back of that, now I'm reading Josh Harris while I'm in this, like, spiritual high mode. So I'm like, this must be fantastic. Okay, I better follow this. Like, I better do, because I'm going to live for Jesus. This is awesome. So I've got to do this too. And then kind of not having as a 15-year-old that discernment to go, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
You said as much anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's kind of crazy when we think about it, and there's all these teenagers reading a book by like a 24-year-old, and like adults thinking it's the right thing. But anyways.
Yeah. I look back and go, like, just so I did find it quite unhelpful to me, and to say the least, I guess. And I am kind of angry about it, and angry about a few things. And now I'm like, no, that book. I think I put my copy in the bin.
There you go.
And the Boy Meets Girl, I think that went in the bin too. I'm not buying any more copies. My kids are not going to be reading. If they read that, we're going to read it together, and we're going to critique it, because that's not going to be something I'm going to set up as you need to follow this for your life. Like, no.
Yeah,
not.
For sure. Yeah, the whole Josh Harris thing. I didn't know that it was such an international thing as well. That is actually news to me.
Yeah.
But
it was like number one. We had I know you worked at a Christian bookstore.
That's right.
And in high school, was it?
Yeah, high school. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Well, yeah, we have Christian bookstores here as well. They're called Coorong, not Lifeway. Like, Coorong is like the big one.
Yeah.
And it was number one bestseller, and all these catalogs, when they come out, it's like, Josh Harris, Boy Meets Girl, buy this book,
Right.
Yeah. So it was really big. Yeah, but just not, at least by my church that I went to, wasn't like pushed like a thing that you should follow.
Right.
Thank goodness,
Yeah.
Some people had some discernment. It's not me.
So with the bookstores and everything, is that like is that sort of, that's another interesting comparison I'd be interested in. Yeah, like there's here you can sort of exist in the whole sort of Christian subculture and not really interact with anything if you don't want to. I mean, there's going to be some crappy movies. The music's okay, but you could only read Christian books, watch Christian movies, or listen to Christian music because of the Christian bookstores and things like that. Is that sort of entrenched in like Australian evangelical Christianity too? That's sort of like all that Christian pop culture sort of stuff.
There is heaps of it. It's not, from my background, I mean, I don't know about everyone's sort of background. From my background, it certainly wasn't like pushed on us as kids. Definitely not by the church. It would have been more like, what your family was like and what your parents enjoyed. And so my parents were a little bit more relaxed, and so we had like just whatever was on TV. Well, the other thing is, I guess, as we were growing up, like there probably wasn't a huge amount in the Christian bookstores, like unless you wanted to spend a lot of money, you couldn't really just buy Christian books, because you maybe run out of things to read, or maybe not
Yeah.
so much. There were a lot of books, but like more like movies or TV. You didn't really get a lot of Christian TV or movies, so you just kind of watched the secular stuff because that's what there was. And
Right.
my parents didn't like band TV or anything, and they're not, they're certainly not to that sort of extent of conservative at all. Like in some ways they're quite relaxed and I guess liberal, and sometimes it was really me putting my own restrictions on myself, like trying to be in line with what I was reading in these books, like, oh, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that, and kind of trying to find my own identity.
Sure. Yeah.
And using those evangelical type resources to, I guess, guide me in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why did I do that? And why? Stupid.
I did the same thing. I did the same exact thing. I'm right there with you.
Except I wonder if, it does sound like in the US it's more like pushed on you, like this is what you should do. This is who you should read. This is who you should follow. Whereas in Australia it's more like, well, you can read them or you can read them or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, it's just a difference in the culture maybe, and in the
Yeah.
the attitude. I think Australians are just a bit more like, like they just, not, they don't get super enthused about stuff. And they don't get super like, we hate, I mean, this is a broad generalization. It's not true for everyone, but it's not as like maybe polarizing all the time. They're not like, we love it, we hate it. It's more like, oh, well, it's okay if you like it.
Yeah.
I don't think so. But if you like it, or we're like, oh, this is pretty good, but if you don't like it, that's okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe, no one just, they think really maybe we're all just pretending like, yeah, it's all right. I don't know.
I'm wishful that someday American culture can get back to that sort of laid back aspect. It doesn't feel like it's going to happen anytime soon.
Well, I think Australia's kind of maybe starting to go like less laid back and a bit more polarized in some ways as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think it's coming back in that way. But in some ways, it's a good thing because apathy is not great when there's people suffering and things need to change. Just going, oh well, it's not good for you, but never mind. That's not going to change anything or improve the world. So downfalls.
Yeah. So so you mentioned in your our emails that you also went to a Christian school too.
Yes, I did.
So was that as positive as the church sort of experiences were, or was that a bit more challenging?
It was still positive, I think, for me, because I was not in deconstruction. If I had been in deconstruction, it would not have been the same experience. And same with church. If I had been in deconstruction, it wouldn't have been as positive. It would have been very difficult. But just the stage I was in, it was a Christian private school, and it was pretty, I guess, evangelical. Like there are some Christian private schools around that are like they say they're Christian, but it's not like we go, they say they're Christian, but they're not really Christian, as in like they're not really like pushing a certain Christian agenda. It might just be more that they have some Christian values, or the founder was a Christian, or or something like that, but it's more academic, whereas my school was not maybe as academic. It wasn't terrible at all, like it was still good, but it was more like the emphasis was not on the academics, the emphasis was on the Christian.
Yeah. Was it either an Ace or a Becca or one of those other sorts of... No, it wasn't?
No.
Oh, okay.
But interestingly, my husband was homeschooled for high school, and I think he did the ASA curriculum. Mm-hmm. So, yes, and that's a whole different conversation that I might have with him because, that's not my story to tell.
Right.
Sure. But our curriculum was still there was a lot of like, Christian stuff through it, and very like, there were a lot of like 6-day creationist type views, even in our science that we learned. So I don't really know. Like, I'm 31 years old, and I am now learning about evolution. I am now learning, the universe, 14 billion years old. Okay, 31 years old is when I've learned that, because Cosmos.
Yeah.
So I started watching Cosmos. Thank goodness for Cosmos and other out there.
Yeah.
So there was like one teacher, I think, who even subscribed to the idea that, like one science teacher who subscribed to the idea that evolution was a thing. Everyone else was like, they're like, it's a theory.
Yeah.
And we'll learn about it in terms of it's a theory, like, so we learn a little bit about it, but like, they wouldn't say things were billions of years old or millions of years old. And actually in my church as well, like, it was I think instead of purity culture, we had like 6-day creation. Like, that was the thing. That was like one of the big things that everyone sort of believed.
Yeah, that was like the theological marker that like sort of defined your or it was like one of the sort of like table stakes. Some places it might be like inerrancy. Another place might be.
Well, yes, and inerrancy was one as well. Definitely inerrancy, and almost like they went hand in hand.
Sure.
So, So, and Ken Ham actually came from my childhood church. I don't know him, like Ken Ham of the Ark, and
that's crazy.
Yes, came from my church, but I didn't know him personally. I know some of his family. I still know some of his family and am friends with some of them. So, but yeah, he originally came, and I think my parents may have known him, like not super close or anything, but just they would probably know each other. And actually, my church had a couple of like creationist type. Is that the right word? Creationist?
Yeah. I think
Yeah, I think so. I'm just a bit. This is my coffee, so I'm just trying to,
nice.
just trying to get my brain working. So we had a couple of creationist ministries because people who worked in our church for Answers in Genesis split off from Answers in Genesis because there was our church had this big thing about apparently someone had like taken work from someone else and used it and not attributed it to them, and like it was huge. I think it was almost going to go to court, like this huge like copyright, who owns intellectual property. And so it ended up being a split between Answers in Genesis and this other creation ministries, they were called. And because so it was a huge thing that my childhood church went through. Yeah, and that's how important, I guess. Well, not how important. Like the issue was someone was accused of taking something from someone else. That was the issue.
Yeah.
But just that it was such a big thing in our church that there were enough people that we ended up having 2 creation type ministries coming out of our church, like people working for the creations out of our childhood church. So that was pretty hectic. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's wild.
Yeah. So like definitely. And even now, like my mum will critique, like if someone says, like something's so many million years old, or she's like, oh no, that's not right, or sometimes sometimes some of my family will make fun of like, oh, how can you think that, like not to me, but to, if someone's saying it on TV or whatever, oh, how can you think that? And so I went through life kind of going, every time I read, so many million years on something in a museum, I'd be like, oh no, that's not right, just internally. And now I'm like, hang on, I don't need to put this filter on anymore and be like, oh, it's not right. Just read things and maybe just listen to what those people are saying and listen to the person who's studied and written this information about this fossil that I'm looking at in a museum. Like, maybe they're right, and just yeah, I didn't, but you don't even realize you have that filter in your head until you question it and you go, oh, no, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but yeah,
Yeah,
so,
that's,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely a lot of cognitive dissonance. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
just going, yeah, for sure.
Like, let's reprogram everything. Yeah. Let's just relearn everything we've been taught about science ever. Yeah, just something chill to do. Yeah.
So that's actually a pretty good segue to you've mentioned this sort of reprogramming, and you mentioned a couple times that you've come to a point where you were deconstructing. So what was the sort of starting point for that for you?
It's such a good question because I think it might have been like quietly happening in the background, just a little bit here and there, and then almost like exponentially picked up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I can't remember exactly what it was. I think one of the very, very first things that maybe started me asking questions was my sister went to Bible college in another state, and she has a master's in theology now, which I'm very proud of because theology is like a boys' club in Australian institutions, and I think same in US probably, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't really...
yeah. There's, I mean, some places have better records, but it's still very much. I mean, some places just like Emily and Hannah, who I had on that went to Moody. I mean, it's very Moody is like is definitely an example of women are actively discouraged.
Actually,
so
do they have a men's choir? Because I think their men's choir came out and sang it at church once, and they were
probably, yeah, I think so.
So cool. I looked at their website and they're like, oh, if you're a student here, you're not allowed to dance. There's no dancing. Like, you can't dance. You can't do dance. And I was like, that's ridiculous. I wouldn't go to that university. We're a stupid university.
Yeah, that was I mean, I went to Indiana Wesleyan. There was no dancing. That's definitely one of the hallmarks of sort of a lot of these Christian colleges kind of were reactionary against fun, basically.
Fun, allergic to. I did go to a Brethren church for a while after my husband and I got married. So that was my next church after my childhood church, and they had no dancing. Like, you got married, you didn't dance, and women weren't allowed to preach, and there was clearly like no women elders ever. Like, don't even think about it. And no female pastors. And they did ask me if I wanted to help lead worship, but I think, which was kind of like a progressive step for them to have women leading the worship. But I think I was pregnant with my second son, so I just found out I was, so I didn't. And what else? Yeah, and they were like, no dancing, none of the above. Yeah, so that was kind of more along that line, I think. And I think maybe that so fueled my deconstruction, moving to a slightly, I guess, a bit more a stricter kind of environment. And I was happy to go there for like the time that we went there. But the thing so back to your question about what kicked off the deconstruction was my sister went to Bible college, studied a Master's of Theology, came home for Christmas one Christmas, and my family were having Christmas, we're going to have our Christmas lunch or whatever. And she started talking to us about how they'd been studying Revelation and how Revelation is not about the end times and it's not about what's going to happen in the future. It was it was John's letter to Christians about Rome and about how all the things that Rome was doing, and it wasn't a prediction of what was to come. Anyway, this was unacceptable to my dad and my brother, who tried to have this, they ended up having this big, long argument, and I was kind of on the fringe of it. And my husband was just like, he just went and ate pretzels because he didn't want to be involved.
Good choice.
Yeah, I wish I had joined him, but it was just one of these intense conversations where everyone's trying to prove that they're right, and which is not that uncommon in my family, but anyway. It's all good. So they had this big conversation, and even I was like, oh no, that doesn't sound right, blah, blah, blah. She's studying theology. Like, what? Anyway, I don't know why we're not listening to the person studying theology rather than just relying on like Left Behind novels or whatever. Anyway, which I loved when I was a kid and read like most of them.
Yeah, you can thank Moody and Chicago for both of those things.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chicago.
Yay.
Cheers.
Yeah, or thanks/blame.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
yeah. So why weren't you listening to the person studying it?
Why wasn't I? Like, why not? Because I just thought oh no, that's not right, and so I need to be right and stick with this like literal interpretation or whatever. I don't know what I thought at the time. But she said some things that later on I thought about them, and even though I was like kind of dismissing them, they made sense, and I was like, that just makes so much sense. And she said to me, for me, it meant I didn't have to worry about the future anymore. I can focus now on what's happening right here, and I can focus on what I'm doing and not worry about, is this sign, is this that sign, like it's a waste of time. And I can just focus. She said, I just focus. Or something like that. And it made, but the way she explained, I can't even remember what she explained now, but just the way she explained what different things meant in Revelation, and they were all related to Rome, not to the future. I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Like, it just made so much sense to me what she said. And I'm like, okay, I think she might be right about that. And so that was, I think, that just started to kick off question. I'm like, what else is she learning about? What else is she right about? Like, and so she would sometimes say things that were different to what we've been taught. And she would say, no, the Bible's not like, it's not written by God. It's written by all these, I mean, I knew it wasn't written by God, but I think I mentioned, because it's inspired or whatever. But she's like, no, the Bible's not written by God. And there's errors in the Bible, like it's not inerrant and all, all these different things, which is just so different from what I'd heard growing up in my church. And like, the Bible's inspired and there's no mistakes in it and it's all consistent and all this stuff. I'm like, it's not. Now I'm like, no, it's not. Anyway, So, just those things that she was saying made sense to me. Mm-hmm. And that might have been like step one. Sorry, I'm taking a really long time. I need to get to the point.
No, this is all good.
Okay, cool. And step two maybe was when I was pregnant with my eldest son. I was having a lot of trouble with anxiety, and I had a lot of trouble with it over the years, like growing up and in high school and in university, but I didn't know what it was. I knew something was wrong. Like I knew things were not right. But I knew that no one else was really struggling with the same things that I was, and I didn't know who I could really talk to about that because it. Anyway, I went to see I had seen a psychologist before, but I went to see another one when I was pregnant. And she diagnosed me with obsessive compulsive disorder. And so for me, what that meant was I would have like these thoughts come into my head that were like truly horrible thoughts, and they would make me feel so anxious. And I would have to do some kind of compulsion to try and relieve my anxiety. It was nothing to do with like my day-to-day life. Like I wasn't anxious about going to school or achieving well or anything like that. It was more these random things would pop into my head and I think, am I crazy? It's like, I just don't think other people think like this. This is just, and I was really concerned about my my sanity, my state of mind, which is quite common with people who have obsessive compulsive disorder, because all these intrusive thoughts, they're like, something's wrong with me. Normal people don't think like this. But going to this psychologist, I learned about like mindfulness, and I learned about learning to sit with thoughts, and thoughts are just thoughts. Like thoughts don't have to mean anything at all. They just come in and they go out. And I had never, because I'd always sort of been taught like, oh, you know, if you think something, that's as bad as doing it.
Right. Yeah. If a man lusts after a woman,
if you thought you,
if you're angry, you kill them in your mind.
Kill someone. That's like just as bad, you know. And and I think for me, learning that thoughts was so helpful to me. Like, thoughts are just thoughts. They don't mean anything. You don't have to worry about them. Don't assign meaning to it. Just let it go. If it comes in, all right, let it sit there and then do its thing, and it'll go away again. And just learning that was so incredibly helpful that I think I started to question, well, thoughts are not really as bad as actions. Thoughts are not the same as actions. I've always been told thoughts are the same as actions, but they're not. So that's probably just wrong. Like this idea that thoughts and actions are the same, that idea is wrong. And just quietly, that was one more thing that I was like, oh, okay, people haven't got that right. Like, I don't think that's what Jesus was saying. I don't know what he was saying, but I don't think it was that. Like, and so that was another one. And then finally, when I had my second son, I really have to thank my children. I think they that deconstruction has kind of, well, I've had some, I had these issues, and my children kind of spurred me to address them, and in addressing them, I've found deconstruction happening. Yeah. Which is kind of telling, isn't it? That, now I'm deconstructing because I'm dealing with my issues. Okay, so maybe some of the things I'm thinking were not so helpful. Like, maybe some of these things I accepted and was taught were not great, because if I have to break them down to deal with my issues, maybe they weren't that good in the first place. Yeah. You know, like, I'm not saying everything, but, you know, like some things, I
think that's fair, though. I mean, you like your children can spur you to want to be, you know, the best person and parent you can be, and also, I think it makes you, I don't know, like evaluate what you want to pass on. Yes. So I credit my daughter with a lot too, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
They totally like tip your life upside down, but not always in a bad way, like in a good way too. Yeah.
So for you, it allowed you to address these things that you needed to address for yourself, regardless.
Yes, exactly. I had to deal with these things. Like I had PPD with my second son, or we call it PND, postnatal depression, and that was like the exponential. That was the point at which it just exploded, and everything. My deconstruction started, because like really started. I was like, it was about a year ago actually, and I remember just feeling like just horrible. Like my son was I found him very challenging as a little baby. Like he cried a lot and didn't want to be put down on, like I had to hold him like so much. I couldn't really settle him. He wouldn't sleep well. Yeah. And so that was, you know, that was happening. And then around that sort of, I didn't really have, my husband's parents live like on the other side of town, nearly an hour away. It's not convenient for them to come and, you know, and help out a lot or anything like that. So, my parents don't live far away, but they were very busy working, and so they didn't really come by and do, you know, like they did sometimes come by and help out, but, and you know, when I really needed them, and that was great, but I just felt really alone in this time of, except for my husband, who's just amazing. Like, really thankful for him. But I felt like it was him and I just together alone in it. And I really felt like, I said to my small group, because I was still going to church in a home group type thing, whatever you call it. Like everyone calls it something.
Yeah. Yeah, they've all got different names for the same thing.
Group, cell group, whatever. Been to them all. And, and I said, I just feel like this little person on a boat in a big ocean, and I just can't see anyone else around me. Like, I can't, yeah. And God, I don't know where God is. Like, why doesn't he make my son go to sleep? Why doesn't he care? Why doesn't he do something? Like, I pray, I ask him to help me. I need help, and he won't help me. Like, it doesn't change. Nothing changes. So this is ridiculous. And I just felt at the same time, for some reason, I've been going through a few like things for advocating for refugees in Australia. Like, I've been doing that for probably earlier in the year, so like from January last year. And I think that just kind of also opened my eyes to seeing like some people are really disadvantaged by other people and by like the government and by the church. Like, some people's attitudes in the church to refugees is quite racist, and that disappointed me. And then the other thing along those lines was I started to think about people who are, like lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and I thought, I've had these like anxiety and depression problems that no one knew about for such a long time, and not everyone even knows about now probably, but like no one knew. When I was going through it, I was all alone. But I was accepted into the church and cared for, but I still felt on the outer, I still felt like I didn't fit in because I had all this stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, how much more must they be feeling on the outer? Because they're not accepted, and they have a lot of stuff going on too, like emotionally, because they're not being accepted, and because the way the church speaks about them. And in Australia, like, we have a lobby group that lobbies the government, like they lobby against marriage equality, and they write, and churches support them. Like, churches sign up to their email, and it's the thing, like, you just support this group. And I was like, I just can't. I just think, how can we be supporting such hurtful, damaging things? Like, I just don't get it. And I think my own pain helped me to think about how other people were in pain as well.
Yeah.
And I find I can't do that anymore. I can't be a part of something that is going to treat people like this. And yeah, so there was a lot of my own personal anger and pain, and a growing awareness that other people are in pain too.
Yeah.
And that kind of, kicked things off. That's when deconstruction began for real. Yeah.
Man, that's a lot. That's a lot to experience in a short window of time. I mean, a year is in the stretch of in the long view, it's not that much time.
It's not.
So for you to go through all of those emotions, that's intense.
It was huge. Yeah. That time was huge.
So I think definitely. I don't know. This is sometimes I get sort of taken aback by people's stories, and this is another one of those moments. It's just sometimes life just is not easy, and then
right.
I don't know. Church complicates it more than it should. But yeah, just all those different things that you mentioned. All at once, like one of those things is enough. Having a fussy child, and fussy is putting it nicely, I'm sure, like extremely nicely, like whether and having a difficult newborn, emotional processing of all sorts. Just to get a little more context of sort of the environment that you're in at this time. You mentioned that, and just in your in our initials emails and everything, that there is a bit of similarity between the sort of religious right sort of aspect in Australia. So that you mentioned that there are lobbying groups and things like that. So there are a lot of parallels. And then during this period, did they just suddenly become like a lot more visible to you than they had in the past?
Yeah,
And was it the refugee issue in particular that really highlighted that for you?
yeah, I think so. I think that made me really think about. Yeah, it just made me realize. Just trying to find the words. Yes, like you're right. It was. Yes. The I had always thought of myself as right wing and conservative because that's what my parents were. That's what a lot of people at church were. And I don't know, maybe the right was different, 10 years ago. I wasn't as involved in politics 10 or 15 years ago as I am now. And so I don't know how that landscape has changed over time. But now, or in the last couple of years at least, probably the last 4 or more years maybe, because of working with other women in the community who assist refugees and advocate for refugees, you get to know like what are the current policies that the government has for refugees, and who supports those policies and who doesn't, and where are the injustices in those policies. And so I think when you see these injustices that are being perpetrated, and then you see people who are Christian supporting that, that question, like what you've thought and what you've believed, you kind of go, oh,
yeah. So
yeah,
what are
shock.
Yeah. What are some examples of that in Australia? Like just incidents or examples you might have of the ways refugees are treated and how they're supported by people in the church and outside the church, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag, I think, within and out of the church. I think you have people in the church who also support like refugee rights and do practical things to assist depending on the church. And I think you get some that are, like any church, you probably get some that are supportive, and if they knew about all the policies or what what was happening, they wouldn't be on board with that.
Are there elected officials that represent themselves as being religious, but then have these? I mean, that's it.
Yeah. Yes. Like there's the treasurer of our country, I think, has said he's Christian. The immigration minister, I'm pretty sure, I would have to verify this, but I believe he said he's Christian. And I'm like, sorry, I just can't even. Like, if he's Christian, then Jesus was like founding some other religion, because he's not following Jesus, like in his policy at least. Like, yes, we have people in the right wing who are in power now, like the government now, would say like, oh, our country was built on Christian or Judeo-Christian values, and so they're really important to our society, and so we need to uphold those values. But at the same time, like for people who are refugees in Australia, if you currently come by boat, the Navy will tow your boat out of Australian waters and just leave you near Indonesia. So you can go back to an Indonesian refugee camp. But before that, if you came by boat, I think about 4 years ago, they have offshore detention centres. So we have 2 detention centres, one on the island of Nauru, which is like I think in the Pacific Islands, and one on Manus Island, which belongs to Papua New Guinea. And they're Australian detention centres. But they're not Australian detention centres at the same time. So if the government decides that they don't want to deal with something, well, it's not Australia's detention centre. It's a matter for the PNG government or the Nauruan government. But if they decide they want to step in, they fund it all, they pay for it all, and if they decide they want to step in, and they make the decisions about who's getting processed, who's getting visas, who's not getting visas. But really there's people on those islands that have just been dumped there for the last nearly 4 years and not processed. So
Wow.
they're living in like these conditions that are like quite poor. That's putting it pretty nicely, I think, but I don't want to overstep, but quite poor conditions. Like I know a lady who worked on Nauru, which is where they keep families and children. So Manus Island, they just keep men. Nauru, they keep men, women and children, so families. And I know a lady who used to work on there as a mental health nurse. And she said because of the climate, it's so hot, they would have to take a 15-minute break in air conditioning every 90 minutes. Like they would have to leave the outside and go inside in the air condition, where the Australian people who were working, they had to go and have a 15-minute air conditioning break. Meanwhile, there's babies and children who live just in like tents on that island, which can get up to like 50 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but 50 degrees Celsius during the day. And that's the condition that they live in. Like, they don't get air conditioning breaks. Like,
Yeah.
they don't get looked after.
Oh, jeez.
Government's like, we're Christian, it's all good. And, and there was a big, like, I might have sent you the link, I'm not sure if I did, but there was a traumatologist who worked on Nauru, leaked 2,000 documents or 2,000 like incident reports about which included like allegations of abuse on the island, like child abuse, physical abuse, so and he wasn't allowed, they weren't allowed to speak, like the workers on the island, Australian workers were gagged. Like it was illegal for them, they had to sign in their contract, it was illegal for them to talk about what happened on the islands and what they did once they finished their work. So, and they were like basically not allowed to report if there was any abuse happening or anything like that, because they could go to jail for 2 years if they did. I'm like, well, it's not Christian at all, obviously. Like it's
right.
so trauma, it's like ridiculous. It's so bad, and I don't think that people in the churches know that. What I think what they are doing is that people who in churches who are not sort of being compassionate towards refugees are saying things like, they say things like, well, they're country shopping, like they're just coming here because they want our way of life. They want to just live where we live. And they might take our jobs. That's actually what the immigration minister said. Don't get me started on him. I'll be here all day. He said so many terrible things. He said terrible things, and we're actually calling for him to be fired, because the latest thing he said was on the Manus Island, in the compound there was a person from the Navy, the PNG Navy, fired shots into the Manus Island Detention Centre, and the refugees, the asylum seekers there, had to like hide for cover, and the Australian employees who work there, like the guards and things, also had to run for cover, because there was just this like rogue Navy person with a gun just shooting. And the Minister for Immigration later, when he was asked about like what was the cause, said that, or he implied that, no, he said that there were tensions occurring between the locals and the people, like the locals of Manus Island and the people in the detention centre, because apparently a boy, they had led a 5-year-old boy into the detention centre, and he was implying that the refugees were going to sexually assault him, this boy. But it turned out that was false. Like the police, the head of the PNG police investigated the incident and said, no, there was no boy involved in this incident where there was a shooting. So the PNG police report completely contradicts what the immigration minister in Australia is saying. The immigration minister in Australia won't back down. Like, he's been on Sky News and interviewed on various news shows. He's saying, no, I won't retract my statements because I'm telling the truth. And he's not telling the truth.
Yeah.
He's lying. So
Yeah.
we're like, you just need to go. Like, he's just doing like a Trump and just saying fake news. And
Yeah.
it just, they're all turning into Trump. They all want to be Trump.
Yeah.
It's really...
every single one of those arguments that you mentioned, cultural fears, economic fears, and blaming.
It's going to take over. Sharia law is going to come in and take over. Christians, we can't have that happening. Like, we've got to defend ourselves. It's like,
yeah.
It's just even that itself, even as an evangelical, how can you justify that? Because isn't your focus on sharing the gospel and winning people to Christ? How are you winning people to Christ if you won't even let them in your country? Like, so even as an evangelical, I don't see how you can justify that kind of thinking. But somehow, I think it is just fear. It's just fear based.
Yeah, it's fear based, and they blame the victims.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So
it's entire mentality. Yeah.
Yeah. What you've gotten your perspective has been broadened by your involvement in these refugee groups.
Yes.
What sort of actions have the groups that you've been a part of? Like, what do they seek to do? And what have you sort of taken away, and what have you participated in? What have you liked and sort of taken away from doing that sort of activist work?
Yeah. I think that's a really broad question, so I'll just try and take it a bit at a time. Yeah.
Sure.
So,
Take it any way you like. So if it's something more along the lines of what you the sorts of things that you may have participated in, if that narrows it down.
Mm-hmm.
And just sort of like how that's impacted your understanding of these things too.
The things that there's so much to participate in that you can't do it all. It's been very, and I think in some ways maybe formative is the word, I'm not sure, for me to be going to protests and to be holding signs and to be seen to be not conforming to like the story that's out there that we don't want refugees here. It's been very helpful in some ways for me to do that, because as like this good little Christian girl who kind of always did what everyone wanted me to do, and that was partly, that was a mix of things, and it wasn't just Christianity. It was a bunch of things that kind of led to me being like that, I guess. But for me to be able to protest and be able to kind of rebel, but for a good cause, has been useful to me. And it's been useful as well it's been wonderful to find other Christians in the community who are doing the same thing. And they're often the Christians who are like quite progressive and not so like fundamentalist or like, evangelical. It's all just about, we're all just literal Bible interpretation, whatever, all that stuff. Like that's not the big issue for them. The big issue is, well, how are we treating people, and how are we following Jesus in the way we act and in what we do and in what we say. Like that's our focus. And that's been, really great. Like, there have been church groups who've hosted a protest. Like, one of the first protests I went to was called the Sanctuary Movement, and it was a church in the city, which I now go to actually, unofficially, but I go there. And it's an Anglican church, and it's not part of my tradition at all. But one of the things that I really liked was how involved they are with the refugee rights and other rights movements. And they hosted a protest, the Sanctuary Movement, and it was for people who were in the community that were refugees, and the government were threatening to deport them back to Nauru or Manus Island, and it's such bad conditions. The church said, no, we can't in good conscience stand by and let that happen. So they said, well, if you're in danger of being deported, you can come to the church and we'll hide you in here. That's basically what that's wonderful. And so to go and be involved with that movement, like to go to that protest, kind of, that was the first one I went to. And then to continue to like find my voice in being able to go to protest and say, no, this is not what we're going to stand for. We can't tolerate this. And then one of the most recent ones was we did a sit-in in the Immigration Minister's office, which was really, it sounds like nothing, but his office is actually locked. You can't actually just walk in there. So it's difficult to get in, and we had to employ a little bit of tricky business. The doors were open for us, yeah. We did not break in. We did not go in uninvited. They buzzed us in. They did buzz us in. Well, they buzzed some of us in, and then and then others of us came in too. So that's how his office got occupied. And we got escorted out by police and, threatened with arrest and all that kind of stuff. But to me, that was a real important moment, because I realized, I've always thought for a long time I felt like I'm powerless against this system of all these different systems, patriarchy, evangelicalism and whatever else. And then I realized I'm not. We all have power and we all have agency, even when there are systems trying to take it away, and even when we are the oppressed, or we're standing with the oppressed. There's power in numbers, and the underdog does have power, and that was a great realization to have. That, you can't tell me what to do. You can't tell me I have no power. You can't just say it and take it away. It doesn't make it so. So, and I think that's true for everybody.
Sure. Just
because someone says you have no power, you don't have to. You don't have to just accept that and go, okay. you can be creative and you can fight it.
That's beautiful. That's great.
It was an amazing conversation.
Yeah. Wow. With all of that, and sort of you're in the midst of all these different things in your life simultaneously.
Yes.
What's and that's the way it's. I guess that's we have to process everything all at once now, sort of. But how do you? I think the easiest way to ask this question is just kind of say, well, where are you now? With how you feel about just about the whole endeavor of coming out of evangelicalism, or if you feel like you're even out of it, or or how you relate to that part of your life, your faith or your belief, or whatever particular word you want to ascribe to it. Just how do you feel about things now, and
Yeah.
And also, just then adding to that, like, are you in a place where you feel either in a community or another sort of place where you feel comfortable, just even just being comfortable, not like basically, yeah, not even saying not even just being comfortable saying and being who you are, but just just feeling comfortable, because
Yeah.
that's something that a lot of people don't have when they're going through deconstruction. The group they're in
Yeah.
doesn't match
Yeah.
where they are. So
Who was
I
it?
just
Someone said weird everywhere. Who was that? Who said weird everywhere?
that was Chris Stroop. Yeah, yeah, that's
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
yeah,
Because I follow him on Twitter now. He's good, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Right. Yeah, weird everywhere is a good way to describe it. I think there are a couple of I am fortunate. I have a couple of friends who are probably not going through exactly the same thing, but sort of going through the same thing. And
yeah,
we meet up and talk about this kind of stuff. So that is somewhere that I think that's my place where I feel comfortable. And I think I'm not sure if I'm comfortable there yet, but the church that I am unofficially going to is a place where I found real like beauty and real, just a real, I think, connection to God, or potential for connection to God, without all the, without all the other baggage that's kind of come with being in an evangelical kind of setting.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's been wonderful. So, and what else? I think. What was the question?
Oh, I rambled for a while. So the
About
question was sort of all over the place, but basically boiling it down, it's just sort of,
how do you
yeah.
now?
How do you feel now about
Yeah.
things? And also, I
Yeah.
mean, do you feel the need to be in a community that addresses that? And if you do, are you in a place where you feel that way, or I mean, are you just fine? Are you comfortable where you are right now in
Yeah.
your state of
Yeah.
deconstruction
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't feel comfortable in the places that I used to feel comfortable. So I don't feel comfortable as much in in the churches. I guess I don't go to those churches anymore. I did go to a Baptist church after the Brethren church for a while, and it was good for a while, but then, there were just some things that I noticed that I still didn't feel entirely comfortable with, even though they were more progressive. Like they do have women preaching sermons occasionally, and they have women who are pastors there. So that was, that's really great. I think that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But there were still just some things that were sort of being said or emphasized, by the senior pastor, which I personally just felt a bit uncomfortable about. It wasn't anything bad as such, mostly. I just didn't feel really like, I just was like, no, I can't get on board, I can't get fully behind this. And the other thing is, I think I don't know that I want my children to grow up in the same environment that I did, and have the same baggage that I had, even though they're different people to me and they'll have a different experience anyway. I don't want them to be told, oh, you're a sinner and that's why Jesus had to die. Like you're responsible for it. And I don't want them to grow up thinking that, or like being told that really, really young, when they can't ask questions and process it and go, what does that actually mean? Like, and I want them to be accepting of of people from all walks of life, and not burdened with shame. I think, like, when I've talked to some friends, we talk about this feeling of shame because, you know, you always get told like how you're a sinner and you're bad, and even you see stuff on Facebook like, oh, I'm nothing without God, and it's like, well, no, you are something. Like, you know, you're a person, and you have intrinsic value just because of that. And so BBC moment. And so because of, I think that's something I don't feel comfortable about. And so I would have to be, I think I just have to really think about where I want my kids to go and what I want them to learn. And I even think about, do I want to send them to a Christian private school? Like, I don't know that I do. I think I would like them to have like an environment where that kind of spiritual stuff is not rammed down their throats, and it's not, you know, with a certain like agenda, but rather exposure to, well, you know, this theology is like this theology is like that. Why don't we think about it? Why don't we ask questions? Why don't we explore? Some people aren't Christians. Some people don't believe in God. Why don't we talk about that as well? And so just having more freedom of thought, I think. So I think I struggle now when it's like, well, this is what we think, this is what you should think. Like, Sorry.
Oh, it's totally fine. It's just to reiterate I know I mentioned this at the beginning of our conversation, but it's 9:30 at night my time. And so my daughter's asleep, but it's the middle of the day where Nicola is. So she has her children are up. So so Nicola has been very gracious to me and being able to talk to me in the middle of her day. So yeah, I know we mentioned that at the beginning, but I want to mention it now too.
Thank you. I feel a bit better now. I'm like, oh, this is not really an abnormal occurrence, though. Like,
no, it's children. It's the middle of the day. It's literally the middle of the day where you are. You're in the future.
Right, exactly.
Or you're in my future.
Sure. Children scream in the future still.
Yeah.
I get sympathy from old ladies when I go to do my grocery shopping because I have 2 boys and they're noisy and they're very clear on expressing their opinions and ideas and likes. I get sympathy from old ladies when I shop. But it's not. Rather getting the dirty stares. You know, I don't get those, so that's good.
That's good. Nicola, thank you. I mean, thank you for talking to me and talking. I feel like we like just scratched the surface, but it's so interesting to hear about someone's experience with something that is in many ways very similar to what a lot of people here in the States, you know, experience, and to hear that from internationally is very interesting, and your story is very, very interesting, and I'm very thankful that you reached out to me and that we were able to talk. It was a real honor and privilege. So, where can people find you online, on Twitter or elsewhere?
I blog at the website you mentioned earlier, which is www.my2companions.wordpress.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at my2companions. And I like to blog about mental health stuff and just church stuff, and a bit of sort of feminist stuff is getting in there as well, because I don't think you can really help it when you're a woman and you're in the church and you kind of deconstruct. I think actually something I wanted to mention and I didn't mention, but that's I think a big part of my journey as well. So just blogging about stuff like that too.
Great. Yeah, Nicola, thanks for very, very much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Blake. Thank you.